Olá pessoal, tudo bom? A gente está aqui com o John Hall, uma figura bastante conhecida da Latinoware, e a gente vai fazer algumas perguntas para ele sobre qual é o futuro do software livre, do pessoal que está estudando agora tecnologia da informação, e quais são as barreiras que a gente vai enfrentar. Ele vai passar um pouquinho da experiência que ele já tem com isso para a gente, tá bom? So John, what's the future of the open source to the people that are studying, to the young people that are starting studying? What will be the difficulties and what will be the facilities?
I personally think that except for a couple of types of applications that closed source programming is actually dead. That closed source programming and the selling of programs, to the masses of people is actually an anomaly that happened at a particular point in time when the price of hardware was dropping dramatically. The price of software that was made, like I described to you, as a contract, as a one-time thing, that was still staying very high. And people thought, well, gee, maybe we can manufacture software the same way we manufacture hardware by making one copy of it and then duplicating it over and over and over again. The problem with that philosophy is that not everybody has the same problem. Not everybody solves the problem the same way. And so as a company, as an engineer, as a developer, what you have to do is you have to say, well, if this is the entire problem, the entire space of the entire problem, I can't possibly write all the code to solve that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to aim for maybe 75 or 80% of the problem, and I will solve that. And then that other part, I'm just saying, well, maybe that's a future release, or I'll never get around to doing it, or whatever, and people just keep waiting for it. But they still buy the product because it solves 75 or 80% of their problem. But now let's take the opposite side. Do I try and solve the same problem for everybody in the world? Or do I just try and solve the problem for 75 or 80% of the people? And the other group of people I kind of ignore, okay? So now, when you do mathematics, you say, wait a minute, you're solving 75% of the problem for 75% of the people, which means you're really only solving 50% of the problem. That's not very good. You get 50% on the test, it's a failure, right? Okay, that's pretty bad in reality. And so this is what I call the functionality gap. It's the difference between the functionality that we need out of the software and the functionality that we actually get. Now let's compare that to open source. Let's say I develop my product in open source, and I give it to somebody. And that person says, wait a minute, this only solves 75% of my problem. Okay, but you have the source code. You can hire somebody to go out and figure out what the 15% of the problem that's left is and fix it. That's your decision. You don't have to wait for me. You can do it. And you say, if you don't really could solve all 15% or 25%, just solve whatever you really need, which is maybe only 5%. So you go out and do that. Oh, by the way, you didn't have to pay me for the software in the first place, right? So you saved a lot of money that you could now pay this very good programmer here, another $500,000 so you can buy another Porsche. So, that's where free software is. Free software gives you the ability to make a decision about whether or not you are going to live with the software the way you've got it, which is like you do with proprietary software, or whether you are going to fix it or hire somebody who can. But that's your decision. It's not Bill Gates' decision. It's not Larry Ellison's decision. It's not Barack Obama's decision. It's your decision, okay? And if there's one thing that business people like, it's control. They like to make decisions. Everybody talks about freedom. But you know what freedom really is? It's control. You get to control. You get to control your life. That's what freedom really is. Because the opposite of freedom is slavery. And you don't have any control under slavery. When you're a slave, you're told where to go, what to do, when to have children, all this type of stuff, and you own no property. When you're a software slave, you're told when to update, you're told how many people can use the software, you're told when you go, what machine is supposed to go. You are a software slave. But free software gives you control. You determine when you're going to apply the patch. You determine when you're going to upgrade the software. You determine what platform it's going to go on. Not somebody else.
John, can I ask a question? What about, have you ever heard about RipRap project? I mean,
Yes.
the 3D printing. What do you think about the RipRap project in this context, about open software, open hardware? What you think is going to be the future in this context? I mean, concerning, you have big companies like Strategies, for example, doing additive manufacturing, those things, and you also have the RipRap project. So do you think people really is going to produce some pieces of stuff in their houses with 3D printers, or?
I think some will. And I think, so it happens today. I can go down to the store and I can buy a coffee mug, right? In the food store. And I get this coffee mug, and it's not really big enough for my hand. It's this tiny little mug, right, like this, I need a big mug for my coffee. And I want to be able to get my hand in it like that. And I hate white coffee mugs, It should be some decent color like brown, so it doesn't show the dirt and stuff like that. I want to have a nice picture of the dog on the front, and I want to have my name spelled correctly, Jon, okay? But try and find that in the store and you'll go crazy. On the other hand, I can go to a potterer, tell them I wanted my mug, I want it shaped like this, I want it to be this big, or put a thing on my hand, paint it this color, hit this dog, spell my name right. It's going to cost me a lot of money, but I have control. And so I think the same thing with 3D printers. And 3D printers are not the be-all, end-all of things, because quite frankly the plastic isn't as strong as steel, okay? But you can go in and use that 3D mold, that 3D pattern that you make on your printer to create a mold, and then do a casting, and then turn that into something. And I think that...
So it's a kind of revolution, right?
It is a kind of revolution, but the other side of it is it's not just 3D printers that are starting to come out. It's also 3D milling machines, 3D and smaller, less expensive machines to do this type of work. And even if you don't get the final product off of that, you can develop enough of the pattern that you can send it off to somebody who has a more complex machine and use that machine to make the final one. So you can create a prototype, prototype of it.
And guys here, I have a question for you.
Okay, but I have another appointment that just showed up, so we're going to have to make this kind of like the last question.
Yes, so I have a quick question. I went to study robotics and things, and we always think about doing really big things, But I was impressed with the single board computer. So why did you choose to work with a single board computer instead of making big things like computers, good computers?
Supercomputer or a revolutionary open source code.
So actually I have taken 15 of these little computers and put them together into a supercomputer. And they more or less fit into a briefcase. And I can carry them around with me. And they only use 70 watts of power. My notebook uses 135 watts of power. And the little computers that I carry around with me, they have, I'm doing the math right now, they have 50 cores to them, whereas my notebook only has 7 cores. So I have a supercomputer. It actually costs less than my notebook does. with these, utilizing these little single board computers.
Can I take this?
Sure.
Just to explain, this is the computer that John Matthew Hall showed for us in this Latinoware. This computer will be manufactured by a low cost here in Brazil. So John, just to finalize, what do you leave for the young people that are starting the open source world? So what the advice that you give for them?
My advice is that don't just learn to program in Java. Learn how the machine actually works. Learn enough about the electronics that you can actually build on a little circuit board, taking the power from these little pins onto the circuit board. You can have relays that will drive motors, you have sensors that will gather information from the outside world, study things like the Arduino that does real-time work. If you learn things at that level, then over time, there will be nothing that will be a black box to you. You'll be able to look at it, and in your mind you'll be able to figure out, for the most part, how it works. But if all you learn is Java, if you never go down to the very bottom, if you never learn machine language, if you never learn why it's important to hold your data in a particular format, then you'll never be able to write really good code. You'll have people tell you that compilers with optimizers will take care of all this, and the answer is they might be able to take care of most of it, but you can give them a lot of help by just writing good code in the first place. So, you know, don't leave yourselves to say, oh, all we need to know is Java and then maybe a little bit of SQL for my database and so forth and so forth, because it's just not enough.